Dr. Parker, who Mrs. Findesy was going to talk to, introduce to you a little more. Mrs. Findesy, Judy Findesy, is the president of our Denver Society of Creation, a society that began here in the Denver metro area about 4 years ago, or at 4 years ago. Her husband Jim is our cameraman in the back. We record everything that is presented around our area. So we're very pleased, thankful and very pleased that you're able to be here this afternoon and that Dr. Parker is able to speak with you. I think he's got a tremendous topic. I think you'll all be very interested in what he's going to tell you about today. And with that, I'll have Judy introduce Dr. Parker.
Yes, well, we're very happy to have Dr. Parker with us today. And Dr. Parker is a scientist, and he especially works in biology. Do you guys know what biology is? What's biology?
Is it the study of dinosaurs?
Well, partly dinosaurs, yeah. Go ahead.
Is it the person that digs up bones and studies them?
Well, yeah, it can be. That's kind of paleontology, but it kind of involves biology, doesn't it, Dr. Parker?
That's right.
It's where people discover lots of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, maybe I'll let Dr. Parker explain a little bit to you about what biology is. He's been working in biology for almost 50 years. And he's studied it, and he believes that what God says in the Bible is true. And he believes that science agrees with what's in the Bible. And he's going to talk to you today about one specific thing that he believes the Bible agrees with, or that science agrees with the Bible on. And that's dinosaurs. Did you know dinosaurs were in the Bible? Yeah. I'm going to turn it over to him. He has his very own museum, even, and he takes children like you on trips, on adventures to dig up bones. So I think you'll really enjoy what he's got to say today. Dr. Parker.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's see, is there anybody here that would ever want to go on a dinosaur hunt? Any dinosaurs? Aha! And you all are in the right place. You know, more dinosaurs have been found right here in Colorado, not very far from where the school is, than most places on the whole earth. So this is a really good place to learn how to be a dinosaur hunter. By the way, are there anything in the Bible about dinosaurs? Can you learn? Yeah, you think there is, don't you? And do you know where in the Bible we can learn stuff about dinosaurs? Okay. Actually, there's a whole bunch of places, but there's one in particular. That's what we're going to talk about today, is where the dinosaurs fit in the biblical record of Earth history, from Adam and Eve all the way up to you and I. And so that's our title, Dinosaurs in the Bible. And we're going to take a look at the word dinosaur. Now, I have to admit, if you look in the Bible for the word dinosaur, it's not going to be there. Well, the word for computer is not going to be there either, because computers were only made recently, and the word dinosaur was only made not very long ago at all. Now, older than you and me, but, you know, kids your age were probably digging up dinosaur bones a long time ago, bringing them to their parents, bringing them to their teachers, and say, what's this, and nobody would answer them. And finally, there was a young lady walking along the seashore in England that found a lizard bone. Only she didn't find a lizard bone like this. She found a lizard bone like this. A terrible lizard, way bigger than any lizard anybody had seen alive. But she took it to a Christian scientist, Sir Richard Owen. He was actually the first leader of the British Museum of Natural History, and asked him to identify what it was. Well, he knew a lot about animal bones. He was the world's leading expert on it, and he recognized right off that, boy, that's a lizard. And the Greek word for lizard is S-A-U-R, saur. But this was a terrible lizard, a very big lizard, a giant lizard. And you know what dino means? It kind of means the same as dynamite. Really powerful, very strong. So he gave us the name dinosaur, terrific lizard, terrible lizard, mighty lizard. That's the idea. And so that's where the name came from. match the description of that dinosaur are described in the Bible. And one of the places you see this is in the book of Job. And so Job lived a long time ago. In fact, some say that the book about Job's life is maybe the oldest book in the Bible. And his experiences and so on. And he had a lot of trouble in his life. Satan was the one that said, you know, Job loved God, and Satan said to God, no, he loves you because of all the things you give to him. He doesn't really care who you really are. And so he said, if you take away all the things that Job has, then he won't like it. He won't like it anymore. He'll curse God and die. And Job did lose things. But he still kept believing in God, and he kept asking God, will you please talk to me? I want to find out what's going on. Please, please, I want to see God. I want to talk to God. And God finally answered him. He appeared to him out of a whirlwind. And you can imagine that kind of scared Job a little bit. And so God started telling Job about the wonders of creation. He said, look around you. Who do you think created the wild horse, the ox, the ostrich? He talked about the ostrich. He talked about the stars that he calls by name. And then he said, this is Job chapter 40, verse 15. He said, behold now, he said to Job that wanted to learn about God, behold now, behemoth. Now that's not a word you see a lot in English, but the people who translated the Bible, they just made the Hebrew words pronounceable so we could say that. Even in English today, you know, construction workers that have great big cranes and tractors and things like that, you know, if you see a big, powerful machine, you say, boy, that's a behemoth. Well, that word in Hebrew meant giant animal. This was one of the biggest animals God ever made. And God described it to Job, and Job knew what he was talking about. He had bones like bars of iron. His strength was in the muscles of his belly. He could hold his mouth against the mighty rushing of the Jordan River at flood stage. And he had a tail like a cedar tree. Well, everywhere in the Bible, a cedar tree is a symbol of strength and power. The cedar trees that were used to frame the temple of God and so on. And so Job knew this animal. He knew what God was talking about. But some people say, well, no, that's not really a dinosaur. They think maybe it's a hippopotamus. Well, a hippopotamus is a big animal, and it roams around, or did roam around in the Jordan River, and it can hold its mouth open against a pretty strong current. But do you think a hippopotamus has a tail like a cedar tree? No. Denver's got a really great zoo, doesn't it? But it doesn't have an animal that looks like that, does it? No, it's not a hippopotamus. Well, some say, well, okay, it's a giant animal. It's not a hippopotamus. Maybe it's an elephant. How many of you seen elephants in the zoo? Oh, yeah, they're really fun. You know, we find fossils of elephants where I live down in Florida. Like you find fossils of dinosaurs up here. But is this the way an elephant looks? No, that's not the way an elephant looks. And so the only animal we know that matches the whole description the Bible gives, or whoops, went too far, is the, what was I pointing at? Oh, over there, okay. There we go. The only animal that matches that whole descriptions are the long-necked dinosaurs. And so the ones that have a big body in the middle, that's the strength is in the muscles of the belly, to move the long neck and head on one end and the great big powerful tail on the other end. And so that looks like exactly what God was talking to Job about, and Job knew about this animal. And so that's where, by the way, I'll ask another question and then come back to this slide. Is there anybody here that could actually lift a behemoth, lift one of God's dinosaurs in one hand and lift it above your head and use it for, could you do that? Can you lift a dinosaur over your head? I think you can. I bet you could. Could you lift a dinosaur over your head? Oh, I bet you could. What about you? You don't think you could? What about you? Could you lift a dinosaur over your head? You could. What was that?
A pterodactyl.
Oh, a pterodactyl? Okay. Actually, you could lift a pterodactyl over your head. You could lift one of these dinosaurs. A Diplodocus or Diplodocus, you could lift one of those over your head. You could lift a T-Rex over your head. How could you do that?
It's with a crane.
With a crane. Okay. I've taught too much college. I don't have this super bright answer to it. I would say anyway. Okay, that would work. Smart, okay. But you can actually do it with your hand, but you have to do it at the right time. Just after it's born. You know how dinosaurs are born? They just, what? You're right. They hatch out of that. She's going to be my translators. When you get old, you don't always hear as well as you used to. And so that great big dinosaur there hatched out of an egg about this big. And we have a museum down in South Florida where I live, and we actually have real dinosaur egg. In fact, we have several models of them, but we have one real one. And none of the dinosaur eggs are any bigger than that. And so when this thing first hatched out of its own, you could lift it over your head. You could put a little string around the baby dinosaur's neck and take it for a walk in a park. Wouldn't that be fun? And so it wouldn't be as hard as you think. And so, you know, here's a little baby dinosaur hatching out of a fossil. We have a replica of this in our museum and a real egg from China. Here's some others. There's a little chicken egg, you know, on one side. And then these are other kind of dinosaur eggs there. And here's a girl holding a baby dinosaur in her hand. What's that other dinosaur? That's the mama dinosaur. Now, you can't hold a mama dinosaur in your hand. And that's amazing. But, you know, they start off little like that and grow to be great big. Well, you kind of started off little. Anybody know how big you were when your physical life began? Now, your spiritual life began with God in heaven before the foundations of the world. But how big were you when you first started? Were you that big? Your mother probably says, I hope not. Believe it or not, you were about this big. You were about the size of a dot, a period on a printed page. But you got way bigger, didn't you? You get way bigger, yes. Well, dinosaurs just kept on growing. You know, people grow to a certain size and quit. But some animals, dinosaurs being one of many of the dinosaurs just kept growing and growing and growing. And so the one that we looked at could be 100 feet long and weigh 80 tons. They could get really big. Well, there's some fish today. You know, in Florida, you could catch a fish called a grouper. They make sandwiches out of it. So I had good ones about like that. But in the open ocean, they would get to weigh 600 pounds. Some animals just keep growing. Others stop at a certain point. And so dinosaurs, some of those just kept growing. Oops, who's that? Okay, if you know the name of this dinosaur, it's okay to just yell it out. Was that T-Rex? Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is a T-Rex. Okay, Rex means king. And the T stands for Tyrannosaur. So this is a tyrant king lizard. This is supposed to be, now this is the movies talking. This isn't scientists talking. Movies, you know, and cartoons and stuff like that make out like the T-Rex is mean, nasty, vicious, and goes around, you know, eating whatever it wants, any other kind of dinosaur, etc. And they did have some pretty big teeth, but this one has a long root. They had 4 teeth with long roots, but most of their teeth had very shallow roots, and they only got about 6 inches long. My wife found a real Tyrannosaurus tooth up in Canada. The tip of it was intact, and the bottom of it she put together piece by piece, and so it was about like that, about an average T-Rex tooth. Some of them are about that big, and only a few get this big. And we've learned something else about T-Rex. When they first found some of these fossils, they pictured it running around upright like this, and this mouthful of fangs, and they're looking around to see what they can find to eat. But instead, the more scientists looked at it, the more scientists studied the way the bones fit together, It said, no, T-Rex didn't walk that way, upright, looking around. He walked this way, bent over with the tail sticking. You'll see a picture of it later, with the tail sticking out behind as a counterbalance. Because it's got the big head down near the ground on this end, and the tail sticking straight out like that. Well, I've been to a place in Texas where there are dinosaur footprints preserved in the rocks in a river bottom. And they're pretty impressive. You know, one of those long-necked dinosaur footprints would be about this big around, and we've got a picture of a little baby sitting in the water, you know, like a bathtub, with a T-Rex, or not a T-Rex, a Diplodocus footprint, but there are also some of the T-Rex footprints there. And so you can see that, but no tail drag. If the animal's tail was dragging behind it as it walked, yeah, it would make a little curve in the river, the same river sediment that kept the footprint. And so instead they walked around like this, those great big jaws and teeth down near the ground for ripping and slashing into pumpkins, watermelons, bananas, cabbage. Could that be? Do you think T-Rex
No.
could have just eaten vegetables and fruit?
No.
Oh, you watch too many Saturday morning cartoons. Remember, Saturday morning cartoons are make-believe. If you really want to know what the first animals eat, what's the only place that really tells you for truly true what the first animals ate? Yes?
The Bible?
The Bible. Okay, and so if you really want to know what the first animals ate, go back to the beginning. What book tells us how God created the animals? What book in the Bible? Yes?
Genesis.
Genesis, that's right. And it's really early on. God tells us that he created the different animals to eat plants. And in fact, I think that's verses up here even. Okay, and God said, behold, I've given you. Now he says this to all the animals and people that lived on the earth. Back in Genesis, in the beginning of Genesis, when creation was fresh and new. Behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree which is a fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for, and the word there in Hebrew means food. It says meat, but in this case it just means food. Plant food, because it describes the plants that they were eating. And so originally God made animals just to eat plants. They didn't have to kill one another at all. There wasn't any death in the perfect world that God first created. And he says to every beast of the earth, to every fowl of the air, everything that creeps upon the ground. And that phrase in Hebrew includes scaly skinned animals like T-Rex and the dinosaurs and so on. Creeping upon the earth wherever there is life, I've given every green plant for food. And it was so. So originally, God made plants, animals, and people just to eat plants. Okay. I've got a tough question for you now. Are you going to tell the truth? Has anybody here, anybody, ever eaten a McDonald's hamburger? Okay, is that a horrible sin? Okay. Well, it may be a sin against good diet. No. No, not anymore. What happened? Okay. Man sins. Our first parents sinned against God. What does that mean? They didn't believe it. They disobeyed it. And so God said what to Adam and Eve? You can eat any food you want from any tree in the garden except one. Well, one. He gave them thousands, okay? And just don't eat that one. That's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's going to hurt you if you eat that fruit. And so what did Satan say? Oh, God didn't really mean it. Did God really say that it would hurt if you ate the fruit off that tree? Oh, he was just testing you. He wanted you to be like God. You to decide whether God's telling you the truth or not. That's a big lie of Satan. But he fell for it. And that's what brought sin and death into the world. And after that happened, then God said, as I gave, he says really after the flood, that as I gave you the green plants, so now you may eat meat. In fact, our bodies begin to break down, and we lost some of the abilities God had created us with. And now you can live on just eating plants, but you have to be really careful because you can lose a lot of nutrient. And unless you're very careful, you need to include some source of animal food as well. That's a big change. What do you think this animal ate? This is an animal living today. Wow. Look at those teeth. Well, what do you think it ate?
Meat?
Looks like it'd be a meat eater, doesn't it? Looks like it could prowl around at night, look for some little frog or something like that, and pounce on it and tear it to shreds. Guess what? It's a leaf eater. And so this still stayed the way God created it to start with. It still just eats plants. And those leaves, kind of like well, in Florida, we have fruit pickers. And they have, big rakes, looks like T-Rex teeth sticking out. And you reach up in the tree to pull the oranges and the grapefruits out of them. And so that's what this one is. What do you think this animal ate? Okay? Yes, in the orange, yeah, in the corner there, what do you think of it?
It's a flying fox.
It is a flying fox. Does that mean it was a meat eater?
No,
No, it doesn't.
it's actually a fruit bat.
Yeah, it's a fruit bat. And so they have these in Australia, and they eat, this is its skull. If we just had it as a fossil, if we didn't have the living thing, why people that don't believe the Bible would say, boy, that was meant to be a meat eater. But they eat bananas and oranges. And in Australia, and papayas and mangoes. And they have a wingspread about 4 feet long. So they're great big bats, but they just eat fruit. They're a real hazard to the fruit growers in Australia. This guy here, look at those teeth. This is a eukaryote. It's an animal that lives in South America. It's about the size of a mountain gorilla. And look at that, it looks like 2 T-Rex teeth. You know what those are? Banana peelers. And so it picks bananas, puts a banana on the end of that tooth, pulls down and pulls the peeling off in one motion. I've thought about maybe trying to shape something like that and sell it as a banana peeler, but that's why I'm not a very good businessman. But at any rate, a grizzly bear, they're famous for catching fish and eating fish, but 80 to 90% of what grizzly bears eat every year are fruits, nuts, and berries. They usually meet only near time for them to hibernate. So, oh wow, what's that?
With a huge dinosaur claw.
This is a big claw, but it's not a dinosaur. And of course, I live and work, in South Florida, and I have that particular thing there is a replica of one claw, one fingernail, the tip of the finger of a big animal called a giant ground sloth. Now, you may have heard of sloths that hang upside down from trees and move really slow. Well, this was a giant one, but we find them in Florida, and this one stood on its hind legs and would be taller than T-Rex. And that's its fingernail, and there would even be, some fingernail stuff over the end. Makes that the biggest claw ever. What did it use that claw for? A giant leaf rake to rake leaves and fruits out of the tree and eat them. So it was just a vegetarian in spite of that great big giant claw. Here's the skeleton. Well, here's the giant picture of the giant ground sloth. And look at that huge claw. And by comparison, here's a couple of people jogging along. And so they don't even, here's the knee of that giant ground sloth, and they don't even come up to his knee. If you take a T-Rex like this and pry it up so it was up straight, a T-Rex would only come up to here. And so this animal's bigger, heavier, and taller than T-Rex. But it was just a vegetarian, just a plant eater, a gentle giant. This guy over here, we also have his fossils in Florida. That's a giant armadillo. You may have heard about places where armadillos get run over on the road a lot. Well, this armadillo would be a match for most little cars anyway. So it used to be a little bit different. Oops, what's that? Yeah, I think you're right. Okay. If that looks like something a dog might have dropped in your yard, yeah, that's about what it is. Okay, so this is poo. But it's petrified poo. And at our museum, I actually have samples of petrified poo that I can pass around. And the nice thing is it is petrified. So it's turned to rock, it doesn't come off in your hand, doesn't smell anymore, it's not squishy. But you can even tell what kind of animal it was. Animal trackers can follow an animal by the kind of droppings it leaves behind. Well, think about a cow, makes a flat, a patty. Horses make road apples, so you can tell what animal it is from that. And if you have a rock saw, my wife has a rock saw, you can cut through it, cut a slice off, polish it, look at it under the microscope, and see what the animal ate. If it was a plant eater, there'll be bits and pieces of leaves and twigs. If it was a meat eater, there'll be bits and pieces of broken bone.
Yeah.
Isn't science wonderful? Wow, we can figure out what dinosaurs ate. And here's one we find in Florida a lot. That's kind of nondescript, but that's petrified alligator poo. Warning, not all of the alligator poo in Florida is petrified. So you've got to be careful before you pick that up. This is a slice. I told you you could look at a slice and see what the animal ate. And if you had a microscope look, those flecks, like if it was a plant eater, would be bits and pieces of twigs. If it was a meat eater, there'd be bits and pieces of broken bone. And my wife sliced this piece off, a dinosaur, coprolite is a scientific name, dinosaur poo that we got right on the border between Colorado and Utah. And so that, if you really want to know what an animal ate, that's what you need to find. And scientists have found that. The technical name, by the way, is coprolite, or petrified poo. Well, when we think about it, and you look at the biblical record of Earth history, people in the past have seen all of the animals that ever existed. Sometimes, you probably heard of a belief called evolution, and they think, different animals lived in the past that no human being ever saw, and different animals lived in the ocean no human ever saw. According to the Bible, no animal ever lived that people didn't see. We all started at the same time. And their descriptions match the historical records of what people have seen, like the book of Job. So there are underwater swimming creatures like the plesiosaur, flying creatures like the pteranodon. Now this is the big one, but the Greek historian Herodotus, that tells us a lot about biblical history, he saw a little pterodactyl, one called Rhamphorhynchus, the great big one. This one had a big long bill with a crest on its head. But Rhamphorhynchus was a little pterodactyl. It was only about that big. He actually didn't have a crest on the back of his head, just a round head, and had some teeth in his bill that Pteranodon doesn't, but he also had a tail. So just a different kind of flying reptile. And that was actually seen by a writer that lived on Earth at the same time that Jesus walked the earth. So these have been around recently. Now this part right here, I think I'm going to skip this and come back to it in case we have time. But I'm going to ask you about this, okay? Okay, why aren't there any dinosaurs on Earth today? Live ones. What do you think?
Because there was a big space rock.
Meteorite, asteroid? Meteorite, asteroid.
Aha! Okay, so you've heard about that there used to be dinosaurs on the Earth, and this isn't the reason they became extinct. Cigarette smoking is not good for you, but it didn't wipe out the dinosaurs, okay? But some people think that it was a shower of meteorites, chunks of rock from outer space, that did in the dinosaurs. And that's at least possible. There are chunks of rock in outer space. The little ones burn up in the atmosphere, the so-called shooting stars. There's a little chunk of rock that burns up as it comes through the atmosphere. And you probably heard movies about bigger chunks that, come down and land on the Earth. There's one that landed in Siberia. It's part of Russia, the Arctic part, way out where hardly anybody lives. But it made a sound that went all the way around the world and flattened a forest 50 miles wide. And so at least that's a possibility. And the Bible tells us that every animal, not just the dinosaurs, all the other animals and all the other people died in a worldwide what? Flood. Yeah. And it could be, the Bible doesn't say whether or not God used meteorites from outer space to trigger the flood, The first event that happened was the fountains of the great deep burst forth. There were lots of water stored underground. In fact, in the Garden of Eden, that water underground came up in spring and fed 4 different rivers that came out of Eden and brought nutrients and goods that made the soil very rich and the plants grow really well. And it could be that God used a meteorite to trigger that. He wouldn't have had to by any means. And the meteorite problem is, the problem with it is, it seems like the dinosaurs died out, but the flowers weren't affected at all. It'd be kind of a strange meteorite that would only kill dinosaurs and leave the roses and things like that untouched. But at any rate, it was a worldwide disaster that did end almost all the dinosaurs and almost all the other animals on Earth and almost all the people. Where were the ones that weren't killed in the flood? Yes.
The pterodactyl.
Could you
Pterodactyl.
What?
The pterodactyl.
Oh, no, the pterodactyls would have survived the flood. And how did they do that? Yes, a purpose.
They survived in the ark.
That's right. They survived in the ark. And so here you see the ark floating in the background over here. And God, why did God send a flood? To destroy the world that he created? Yes.
Because all the people had an evil spirit, except
All the people had an evil spirit.
Yeah, all the people had an evil spirit. In fact, Genesis 6 says that every imagination of man's heart was only evil continually. I mean, you know what it is for somebody to think bad thoughts and act evil. But what if everybody was doing that all the time? And the Bible also goes on in Genesis 6 to say it grieved God to his heart that he even created people in the first place. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And so God called Noah to build an ark. He didn't want to wipe out all the animals. He wanted to give them a fresh start. He didn't want to wipe out all of the people. He wanted to give them a fresh start and a chance to live as God intended to live. Does anybody happen to know how long it took Noah and his 3 sons and their wives to build the ark? Yes.
120 years.
You're exactly right. 120 years. So that was some big building project, wasn't it? And it wasn't just a building project. It was also a witnessing project. And so God, some people say, well, gee, God, that was awful mean of God that people would walk around minding their own business, although their own business in that day was sin, sin, and more sin. But wouldn't he give them a chance? Wouldn't he give them a warning? And he did. And so for 120 years, as Noah was building this ark, you can believe that word spread everywhere. Hey, there's this funny guy, building this great big boat and talking about a worldwide flood if we don't repent and turn to God for salvation. Does anybody know another preacher that God sent? So there was a city that was so evil, a city of Nineveh, that God resolved to destroy that city, just like he did Sodom and Gomorrah. But he didn't want to destroy them unless he gave them a chance to repent. Does anybody know the prophet that God sent to Nineveh to warn them that if they repented? Yes. Jonah. Yeah, right. That's very good. By the way, was Jonah really looking forward to, oh good, I get to go tell the good news to these evil people and God will spare them? Was that Jonah's attitude in the green shirt? What do you think? No. Okay. Yeah, Jonah, God gave him a great challenge to save all these people in this big city, and Jonah ran the other way. I wanted to destroy them. They were mean to the Israelites. And so Jonah was reluctant. But if you disobey God, go this way God doesn't want you to, does he have a way to bring you back? Oh yeah, he can put you back on track. In this case, he took the boat that Jonah was in and tipped him overboard and let a great big fish swallow him and spit him up. And then God said, you're going the wrong way. Nineveh's that way. And what did Jonah say? okay. You know, when my wife was trying to talk me into accepting a call to go to creation research, I didn't want to. And she kept reminding me, remember what God did to Jonah? Okay, I thought, well, maybe I better at least go to the interview. So, all right, so God sent the flood, but he also provided a way of escape and let Noah tell everybody about it for 120 years. So, of course, did all of the dinosaurs die in the flood?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, dinosaurs were on the ark? Could there be dinosaurs on the ark? And some people say, well, there can never be, oops, I got it. Let's see. I guess I thought I had a slide there and don't have. I'll get back to that, I guess, in a minute. But, you know, a lot of people say there couldn't be any dinosaurs on the ark, they're too big. Well, the big old ones were too big, but what about the dinosaurs that hatched out of the egg? What about the eggs? You know, there are about 50 different kinds of dinosaurs. Well, if Noah had taken the eggs, all he needed to take all the dinosaurs would be about 2 bushel baskets. Okay, but that would be cheating because God wanted to multiply and fill the earth again. So he wouldn't take just the eggs, and he wouldn't take the big old dinosaurs that probably didn't even lay eggs anymore. He'd take young adults. Some of the dinosaurs never got any bigger than mice. They're called Dinosaurs, means mouse lizard. Some were about average size, some were the size of chickens, some were huge. But you know, there's a Galapagos tortoise this big, well actually bigger than this. But a Galapagos tortoise this big around can lay eggs and reproduce. So do you think God brought this Galapagos tortoise on the ark or this one? Okay. A young adult. And so that great big long neck we saw to start with, 80 feet, 100 tons, probably at 15 feet, you know, and then a few hundred pounds would have been ready to lay eggs and reproduce. And so that would be the size he took. And these animals were on the ark, and so they got off the ark and began to multiply and fill the earth. You have a question or comment?
Comment.
What's that?
The velociraptors are only human size.
Velociraptors are only human sized. How big are the velociraptors?
Oh, yeah. How big are velociraptors? Well, it depends on whether you mean the real velociraptor or the ones in the movie. You know, how many of you have actually seen Jurassic Park movies? Okay. And some of you are not willing to admit it, okay? And so there's a movie about, you know, growing dinosaurs on an island, and the velociraptors are supposed to be about 6 or 7 feet tall, and they look like little miniature T-Rexes, and, you know, they made them in the movie, they made them, you know, with the eyes looking everywhere and sharp teeth, and they can run real fast. But when they made the movie with the velociraptor taller than people and all ferocious claws, the real velociraptors, and that's a real name of a real dinosaur fossil, but the dinosaur fossil was only this tall. And so if you're making a movie, you just take the real one and then press enlarge, you know, 6 times and make it tall as you want it. So the real velociraptors are about this size. The ones in the movies, you know, are about this size, but that's just made up. So you can stretch them out like that. Some of the animals that got off the ark, the animals that got off the ark included dinosaurs. And in the picture here, you have a crew that includes a really good friend of mine, Buddy Davis, works with Answers in Genesis, and he's a Christian creation musician. Guitars, how many of you have ever heard music by Buddy Davis that you knew of? You have?
No.
And one of his famous songs is Billions of Dead Things. That dinosaurs are billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. But he's also an explorer. And so he took a team of 5. One of my students in geology that now teaches geology at the university, he was on that team. 5 of them went to the north slopes of Alaska, way up near the North Pole, because they'd heard there were the fresh bones of dinosaurs along the river in the north of Alaska. And they went up there and they found them. They brought back 200 pounds of fresh dinosaur bones. They weren't fossil. You know, you've probably been on a picnic with your family and so on in the woods, maybe a church picnic. And, you know, you maybe have Kentucky Fried Chicken, you're done. You throw a bone in the woods, you know, it's not petrified, it's not a fossil, but it's a bone you can identify. Well, that's what they found. Only they were dinosaur bones, not chicken bones. And just, we have some in our museum. Now, Buddy found them, I didn't find them. But we're an official museum, and so they have a little, you know, had a permit from the federal government, everything to do this. Well, how long does a fresh bone last? You know, if you do throw a chicken bone in the woods, you go back there next year, I want to see the chicken bone I threw out there when we had a birthday party last year. It's not going to be there anymore. Scavengers are going to eat it up, it's going to decompose, it's not going to be there. So if you find fresh bones, that can't be very long ago. And so these are some of the dinosaurs that got off the ark. Dinosaurs have been on the earth. Lots of people in lots of places of the world have seen them. The big pteranodon, the scientific name for it is Quetzalcoatlus. And it's actually named by an emperor of the Aztecs of Mexico that described these kind of dinosaurs. The Plains Indians in North America had pictures of the, quote, Thunderbird, one of these T-Rexes. A good friend of mine that writes books about dinosaurs up in Canada, Vance Nelson, has been down to a site in Peru where there's a painting of the Peruvian Indians hunting dinosaurs, 9 hunters with spears gathered around a dinosaur that looks just like dinosaurs you see in the museum. Only when they dated the paint on this turned out to be 3,200 million years old, not millions at all. They were hunted for food by the American Plains Indians. And sometimes, you know, you go to a park and the ranger who is not allowed to tell you anything in the Bible will say, well, you see these pictures Indians drew? That's a dog, that's a cat, that's a horse, that's a mythical animal, that's a snake. You know, so the mythical animal is a dinosaur, which isn't mythical at all, it's a real one. Okay, who knows this guy? Okay, yes, and the white and purple, what do you think that guy is? Okay, I guess you would have known anyway, even if the name wasn't up there, wouldn't you? Now, this is what I was telling you. The modern version is not T-Rex standing up like this, but it's T-Rex bent over. See how the tail sticks out and the jaws are down here, looking down at the ground. You'd be a lousy hunter. You know, you can't get his head up high enough. And those little short hands, that doesn't make a great hunter either. You know, but he's got those jaws that he would be a great watermelon pumpkin cantaloupe eater. Okay. And of course, if you ask you know, somebody who believes in evolution, well, how old is a T-Rex? They'd say, boy, oh boy, you know, maybe this one's supposed to be 68 million years old. It would be terrible to be 68 million years old, wouldn't it? He wouldn't have any earth to stand on. Huh, that'd be horrible. So, and do we know that it's not that old? Sure we do. And here's one of the ways we know. The Bible's a good way to know. But look at this. See that red squishy stuff? That's fresh bone marrow. It's still red. It's still squishy. Now, you may or may not know this, but you know, inside your leg bones, inside your arm bones, inside your rib bones, the insides are mushy, and that makes red blood cells for you. And red blood cells are the cells that carry oxygen all over the body, so you've got plenty of energy. And so that's really good. Well, that was the way it was with T-Rex. They had bones, they had bone marrow in the middle, you know, that would make oxygen for them. And they died so recently that it's still soft, red, and squishy. Now, that's really rare. Because usually when an animal dies, the bones will break and bacteria and stuff can get in there and eat it up. But Jack Horner from the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman found this T-Rex. It was in the high mountains of Montana, not really very far from here. And one of the leg bones was really well preserved. It was so sealed on the outside that nothing could get into the inside. No bacteria and fungus could get in there to eat up or make the material, the bone marrow, decompose. And so you've got this red squishy bone marrow, and it's got blood vessels in it. And so here's a blood vessel, and those little red things are red blood cells. Anybody in this room have red blood cells? Yeah, okay. And our red blood cells, by the way, are just 280 million molecules of hemoglobin to carry oxygen. The red blood cells of reptiles actually have a nucleus in them, like you see down here. That's DNA in the center. That means that cell can reproduce. Now, our blood cells don't have the nucleus, and they get filtered out by the spleen and replaced by the bone marrow. So we always have a fresh supply. But, you know, according to some people, boy, if you had dinosaur DNA, you could clone a dinosaur. Well, that's partly true. You'd have the information. But the only thing that can read DNA information on a dinosaur and make a baby dinosaur is a dinosaur mom. So we still got to find a real live dinosaur to grow the dinosaurs from here. Well, you know, does this really look 68 million years old? No. You know, things a lot long before that. And the blood vessels are still stretchy. There's a lady scientist, Mary Schweitzer from North Carolina, was the one that did most of this work. And she'd been trained in forensics, studying dead bodies to solve crimes. So she knew a lot of stuff. She was on TV one time with a little block of this T-Rex blood, and you could see the blood vessels in there, and she grabbed one with a pair of tweezers. The camera zoomed in, a pair of tweezers picked up this blood vessel, and she stretched it up, and then she let go, snap, snapped right back again. Snappier than my blood vessels, okay? Some of my skin doesn't snap back as fast as it used to either. Now yours still work, good. Enjoy it while you can. And so this has got to be fresh. It can't be 68 million years old. And boy, oh boy, this means that the whole idea of millions of years of struggle and death, you know, there's a theory, you know, well, not a theory, there's a belief people have that the earth is billions and billions of years, billions of years old, and that all the life on it came about as a result of time, chance, struggle, and death. No plan, no purpose, just time, chance, struggle, and death. Well, that's kind of sad. It's also very unscientific. But does anybody know the name for that belief? You'll hear about it plenty. Yes?
Evolution.
Evolution. That's the name given to it. But remember, that's just a name for a phony belief. People trying to explain what they see in the world without having God involved in it. So that's, well, now we know that the dinosaurs have lived much more recently than that, and all over Europe. This friend of mine in Canada's book, Dinosaurs, Untold Secrets of Planet Earth, has photographs, jade artwork, from all Indian pictographs from all over the world that show dinosaurs have been here recently. There's a few people that believe they might even still be in remote areas of the world. Okay, so that's pretty dramatic stuff. This is the slide I expected earlier. You know, some people say, well, God couldn't save the dinosaurs on the ark. The dinosaurs would just tip up the ark, flip it over, and sink it. But of course, that's a lie. You know, that's just wrong. Because the dinosaurs, you wouldn't have to take the big old ones. A T-Rex that could lay, and T-Rex can get pretty tall, although it's stretched out this way. But T-Rex is only that tall when it first hatched out of its egg. You know, if T-Rex did stand up, you could let it perch on your shoulder like a parrot. Wow. Would you want to do that? Maybe not. One of you would. I'd be willing to try it. But even if they were plant eaters, they might still get kind of feisty and bite your ear off, so you have to be careful. So they didn't take the old ones, they took the young ones. And so truck that size, all of the known kinds of dinosaurs that we have, as young adults, not just as eggs, but as young adults that could get off the ark, multiply and reproduce, would fill one corner of one of the 3 floors of the ark. Does anybody know a place today where you can actually go and see dinosaurs inside the ark? Yes?
Nature and Science Museum.
Nature and Science Museum. Nature and Science Museum.
Which science museum?
Nature and Science. We have a museum.
Oh, Nature and Science Museum. Well, that would be kind of, I wish they would.
Yeah.
Do they really have one inside the ark?
Yeah.
You can see dinosaurs at the Nature and Science Museum. If you go to one a little farther over in the northern part of Kentucky, there's a Christian group, Answers in Genesis, that had some Amish people build a whole ark, over 500 feet long using the biblical measurements. And they made animatronic dinosaurs, not live ones, that could actually move and do things. And they fit, one corner of one of the 3 floors on the ark. And of course, if they were on the ark, they got off the ark and they began to multiply and refill the earth. And so it wasn't just dinosaurs that once got to be real big. My wife and I were once on a creation speaking tour in Japan. And in the museum in Tokyo, we saw a fossil of a dragonfly 27 inches wide. The wings were that far apart. And so, sometimes you call these things dragonflies, because they're so big. And boy, do they have awesome wing action and so on. But there were lots of giants on the earth in those days. There's a phrase used in the Bible. See this guy right here? Okay, this is here's a little girl, our youngest daughter at the time. And that would be about the size of a giant beaver. In our museum in Florida, we have the skull of a giant beaver. The teeth of a giant beaver are that long. The skull is bigger than mine. Okay, compared to modern beavers, about that big. So there were lots of giants on the earth in those days, including some of the dinosaurs. Some of the dinosaurs were just small. This is one we dug up a mile from our house at East River. Is an elephant bone and a mammoth. And by the way, this is a baby mammoth. Later on, we found the much bigger bones of mommy and daddy. And so there were lots of big animals. And the conditions before the flood were even better for that. And it wasn't just Job that seen dragons or dinosaurs. St. George is pictured, in much European art, living areas of medium-sized dinosaurs and so on. Indian pictographs in Western North America, accurately, some of them are more accurate than the scientific drawings. The scientists discovered later the Indian pictures were right after all. Well, what's a dinosaur? My favorite definition. Okay. A dinosaur is a missionary reptile. Now, what do I mean by that? Does that mean dinosaurs give sermons on Jesus Christ? Well, no. But a missionary is somebody that tells the world about Jesus, even if it's not with words. And so you can do that with every fossil you find. We have them in Florida. And I tell the students that when you find a fossil, make a necklace out of it. And anybody asks you, do you believe in Jesus? Do you have any evidence for that? And you say, well, yeah, right here. And it doesn't matter what fossil you hold. You wouldn't want to put a very big mammoth leg bone there. But you can find a little fossil. And the design features in that little fossil tell you about creation. We never find any animals that look like they were thrown together by time and chance and, fighting with other animals. They look like they were designed with a purpose, just like you were created with a purpose. I've never let anybody tell you you don't have a purpose. You're just a product of time and chance, destined for death. No, you're a result of plan and purpose, destined for life, if you'll accept the love Jesus Christ has for you. So that design you can see right there. But a fossil's dead, isn't it? That's the sad news. And so fossils, the design tells us about creation. The fact they're dead tells us about sin. That sin brought death into the world after God had created a perfect world. Darwin thought struggle and death made the world. We're a world of living things. And of course, they're preserved as fossils. Well, if a plant or animal dies in the backyard or the woods or gets run over on the road, it isn't fossilized. It decomposes. It rots away. So the design tells you about creation. Its death tells you about sin and about evolution. Its preservation tells you about the flood. Because these things are preserved in rock layers mile deep all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. But we find many of the same kinds of things still living today, which tells us about the salvation we have in Christ. So we see evidence of Christ as creator, sustainer, judge, and redeemer. The dinosaurs, their design shows God's perfect creation. Their death and disease shows how mankind's sin brought corruption. Graveyards show worldwide catastrophe of Noah's flood. And of course, God's providing the ark to save life points to his loving plan of salvation in Christ. And so I'm going to back up several steps. In a picture form, that would be creation, sin, flood, and salvation. All of that you can see with dinosaurs or any other fossil. If you ever come with your parents or grandparents down to Florida and want to see all this with the Florida fossils, we don't have any dinosaurs like you guys do, but we've got some big elephants and great big shark teeth and things like that. It would be fun to hunt. And you really learn the same lessons that you can learn reading God's Word or coming to school right here. Yeah. Any questions in the last half minute? Anybody want to ask anything? Anything about, oh yeah, there we go. You had a question way back at the beginning we didn't get to.
How big were Jurassic snakes?
How big are
Jurassic snakes.
Jurassic snakes? What do you know? Okay. I don't know, but, okay, just because I don't know the answer to that question, I think I can still sell something with you. I don't know about Jurassic snakes. I bet they were pretty big, because today we have anacondas that are over 30 feet long. We have pythons that could be 30 feet long. We have alligators that could be 20 feet long. By the way, there's a fossil alligator that was 50 feet long that weighed more than T-Rex. Well, you know about that alligator, big alligators and big pythons? We live just a little ways away from the Florida Everglades, big swamps. And we had a scientist walking through there. Pythons got loose after a big hurricane in Miami, and they love the Everglades. So we now have snakes in Florida, 30 feet long, and gators in Florida more than 20 feet long, and two of them got involved in a fight and killed each other. And so they actually found the dead bodies of a python crushing a snake, alligator, and an alligator biting into the flesh of a python. And so I know those are big. Most of the things in the past were even bigger, so I don't think I want to know how big a Jurassic python was. But you can bet it was pretty big. Yes.
Okay, so do we
Do you want me to
cut
do
this
more
off here?
questions? Or?
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
do they have how much more time do they have?
I would say probably about 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Okay.
A couple more questions?
All right, we'll take you to your, yeah, okay.
How did they figure out how the bones went together?
How did the bones go together? How did they figure out how the bones went together? In a fossil day, how do you figure out how the bones go together?
By hard work. How do you figure out how the bones fit together? And the nice thing is, we start with God's plan. And so God uses the same plan, you know, like ball and socket joints and hinge joints and, smooth joint surfaces and tapered long bones. And so by studying animals living today, the rules still apply because it's the same God who made the fossils as the God who made the animals living today. And my wife's the one that's real good at that. And we have reference books that help us, yes.
I do have comments. My grandparents have been flooded, and once we were going on my Uncle Jim's boat in Tampa Bay, and the entire family, I couldn't see it, they saw a gator, an alligator on the side of the bay.
They saw an alligator on the side of the bay, Tampa Bay.
Oh, yeah. We've got lots of alligators down there. And they actually have a lot of the features. Alligators lived before the flood, and there are alligators. Did I say this already? There's a fossil crocodile been found bigger and heavier than T-Rex. So they're big now, but they were once even bigger. How about the young man in black back there? Yes.
How big is a mosasaurus?
How big is a mosasaurus?
We just got a donation of a mosasaur fossil found in Texas. And the mosasaur is a swimming kind of dinosaur. And so, but it's not a fish, it's a reptile. And it's got teeth that looks like T-Rex teeth, great big sharp pointed pegs. And I'm not sure what the maximum length is, but I'm going to say it's somewhere around 50 to 60 feet. And so they're about as long as a big school bus. They may have even been longer. If my wife were here, she would know exact amount. But they got big, really big. In other words, they could stretch all the way across this room and then some. And the class could, you know, if we had one hollowed out, the class could walk all the way through from the front to the back without hitting the top. Okay.
I think we're going to have to cut it off there so that they can get back to class.
Okay.
Should we thank Dr. Parker? Can you thank him?